feels good and it's healthy, good for the mind, good for the body. What's to lose? So we were just meditating on breath, right? So my question for you is, who is that for? What type of person is that for? Does the question make sense? In terms of where we are in the text, does anybody remember if I do the screen share again? Oh, let me make sure the right text is pulled up. Okay, we're in volume 3 now. So, right, the Sunday classes are currently volume 2, but this class is volume 3. So we're in two different places of the same text, but in English, the English translations, they're actually different books, right? In case I think everybody is aware of that. Okay. So, right. So if you don't have the book and you're not online, then I guess you'll have to just listen. We do have extra copies inside, actually. We should prepare them for, for next time, but yeah, for now, it's okay. Okay. So we have this whole big outline here. I'm looking in my text, it's page start of chapter 2, preparing for meditative serenity. Okay. So we have 1, how to train in meditative serenity, and that has a long list of, sorry, it's actually I, not 1. So I, how to train in meditative serenity, and then there's a long list of subheadings, right? A, relying on the preconditions for meditative serenity. We've gone through that. B, how to cultivate serenity on that basis. So this is sort of one of the big umbrella headings where we are now. Within that, there was 1, preparation, 2, actual practice. Within the actual practice, we have A, the meditative posture, B, the meditative process. Okay, so now we're still within the meditative process, right? 1, how to develop flawless concentration under that heading. A, what to do prior to focusing the attention on an object of meditation. And then B, what to do while focusing on an object of meditation. Okay, so A, what to do prior to focusing the attention on an object of meditation. That was a pretty short section and in the text, just a paragraph or so. And it talked about all the preliminary practices and the practices of persons for small and middling capacity, right? Those all those other meditations that are part of the Lam Rim Chenmo. And then B, what to do while focusing on an object of meditation. This is where we comes to where we are now. That has 1, identifying the object of meditation upon which your attention is set. So this is where we are, right? That's talking about objects of meditation. Okay, so then this is 27. In the current version I have here is page 27. Here's this 34. Okay, yeah, different printing. Right, I mean, it's just the beginning. Yeah, it's just the outline at the beginning of the text. Yeah, I'm just going through the outline to go back to the question. Right, what was the question? Sorry, it's not the beginning. It's not the very beginning of the book. It's chapter 2. Yeah, the beginning of chapter 2.
So the question was, um, who is like focusing on the breath for, or who is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's where we go. So just to go down again. So then we have the presentation of the objects, and we have those 4 categories, and then number 2, who should meditate on which objects, right? So that's where we've been. So that's where the question comes from. So who should meditate on the breath? Yeah, go ahead, Elise.
Oh, well, now I'm actually kind of doubting myself, but I was thinking from earlier that it was persons of small and middling capacity, or like all each one. But maybe if we're in this section, isn't that more like great capacity?
That's a
Now I'm not sure.
right. Well, that's such an interesting way of looking at it, actually. So great point. Why would you say that, actually? Let me just ask, why do you think that would be the person who should meditate on the breath?
Um, well, I kind of said like all three there.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, initially I thought it was small and middling capacity because I don't know. It seems like it's kind of one of the early, like more
More
simple,
basic.
usually more like basic, yeah, points of focus.
Sure.
But then now that we were in this section,
Ah,
um,
well,
that's
now
why,
you
yeah,
tell me. All right,
yeah.
cool. Well, let me just make a short point, and then Carrie had her hand up. So, yeah, for sure, any of the persons of three capacities can use the breath as an object of meditation and should at various times. This section on who should meditate on which objects is not talking in relation to the persons of three capacities, but just in relation to sort of what is the issue that you most desperately need to work on in terms of your mind. In other words, which affliction or what is it that is going to most directly help you at this time. So that's the context of this section. But at least at your point, was very important to just in general to acknowledge that when we look at the persons of three capacities, and then we see that, well, the person, the training and the mind and the stages of persons for great capacity, this whole section of the Lamrim Chemo, which is all volume 2 and volume 3, right? Huge amount of text there and description of a lot of practices. So then you might say, well, anything that comes in there, you might think, is only for persons of the great capacity. Well, what about this serenity practice? Doesn't every Buddhist or even just ordinary non-Buddhist, like it's just a general concentration, shouldn't everybody do it? Yes, of course. So why does it come in this section then? Is because it's the six perfections, right? So we have the perfection of generosity, right? First, we have where we are on the Sunday classes, how to develop bodhicitta, then training in the six perfections, right? So the first four perfections are still all in volume 2. Then volume 3 is where we start the fifth perfection, which is concentrate, meditative stability or concentration, right? We say in Tibetan it's samten, and in Sanskrit it's dhyana, and in Japanese it's Zen, right? Zen in Chinese, Chan. So the word Zen is the fifth perfection, meditative concentration, right? So that's why it's coming in this section. It doesn't mean that it's limited only for the persons of great capacity. It's just the structure of the text that you're going through the six perfections. Okay. So, but okay, enough about that. And Carrie, what did you want to say? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the cars are a bit noisy. So Elise was saying that she thinks she initially thought that meditating on the breath would be for persons of small or middling capacity, but then as she thought about again that we're in the section on training the mind for stages of persons of great capacity, then she thought, well, maybe it must be for all three of them. And that's exactly right. For all three of them, but in relation to then what kind of issue you have that is most this kind of strongest thing you need to work on, then does anybody remember who would meditate on the breath? What do you think, Neil? Mental wandering is a good way to say it. In general, again, this is one of those terms that's a little hard to translate, but right, someone who just generally has, you know, is an overthinker, kind of too much discursive thinking. Yeah, sort of uncontrolled discursive thinking, mind wandering, you can say. Sure, that's a fine way to say it. Again, the Tibetan word is, as I said, I think on Sunday it came up, namtog. This word also came up there. Mm.
I thought that was the word for when you have suspicions about other people's motivation. Is that the word you're talking about?
It is, and it's funny. It means something slightly different here, but
Ah,
very connected. So
interesting.
I'm just trying to see what in English we have here. Where do they go? It just says discursiveness in the English, right? So the Tibetan, I think is just the same. Yeah, Namtok. Let me just double check. Nampartopa. Yeah, Nampartopa. Nampartopa is the expanded form of Namtok. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's one of these terms that even sometimes, it really just means conceptual thought, which isn't really negative, right? So this word can sometimes mean this sort of like over projecting sort of way of thinking that kind of fundamentally comes down to us sort of having suspicion of others, a kind of, it's I've seen translations where people translate it as what is Lama Yeshe used to call it, something like a much stronger word, but what was it now? Something like paranoia, but not I don't think it's exactly that, but a strong, even stronger word, right? But it's not necessarily that strong. That's included too, but it's even just kind of any like how I was describing it before. Now here, it really just means like you're talking about Neil. The word mind wandering is quite good. Someone who's just like, you're just constantly spinning, right? Ruminating, thinking, not necessarily judging, projecting with that kind of suspicious attitude, but just overthinking everything, right? Can't stop your mind. So that's the kind of person for whom the breath would be a helpful object of meditation. Very good. So as it says again, and then we can just read from the text, starting with attachment, as there are various kinds of people, from those with a preponderance of attachment to those with page 39 now, to those with a preponderance of discursiveness. Asangish. So again, using the word discursiveness is maybe I don't know how evocative that is. It's again, some of these terms are difficult because there may be good terms in general, like they mean what the text is trying to say, but they're just kind of not common words that we hear a lot, right? Like discursiveness isn't something that's talked about. Mind wandering is a much more common term, right? Mind wandering is what they're talking about here, right? So you could say preponderance of mind wandering, discursiveness. Asanga Shravaka level cites an answer to a question of Ravata. So now we have a quote, as Tsongkhapa is so wonderful at doing, is bringing in the source material. Shravaka levels, again, is a text by the great master Asanga, but here Asanga is citing, right? It seems like a sutra, although it's not 100% clear, but it seems to me like this is citing a sutra here. Okay. Rivata, if attachment uniquely dominates the behavior of a monk yogi, practitioner of yoga, then he focuses his mind on the object of meditation of ugliness. If hatred dominates his behavior, he meditates on love. If ignorance dominates his behavior, then he meditates on the dependent arising of this condition. If pride dominates his behavior, he focuses his mind on the differentiation of the constituents. And so here, I think it's important to understand, like I was saying last week, part of this practice is to develop self-awareness, right? Just like we were doing that open monitoring meditation, connecting with your mind. That also means connecting with which afflictions are most present, are most common, getting to be familiar with that and be honest about it. We all have afflictions, right? Like it's so funny. When I was in Sara College in northern India in Himachal Pradesh, Dharamsala, where His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives, that same town. Uh, I was there for over 3 years studying, and it's a community where you have mostly Tibetans in this campus, mostly Tibetans, right? Handful of foreigners, including Asians and other a few Westerners, and then other Himalayan people from India, Himalayan parts of India, and so they're all majority like long term, born Buddhist, they know the drill. They're on top of being born Buddhist and raised Buddhist, they're studying, the main course at that college. They have the course for the foreigners, which is language program, and then the philosophy program, which you can join once you've learned the language. But then the main course is like a Tibetan studies BA, basically a bachelor's. That would be something like, like we have kind of general humanities studies. It's like that, but in Tibetan literature, Tibetan history, Tibetan Buddhism, and they study Dharma too, right? And writing and all that. So I was there anyway. So I thought, learned a lot. It was a great experience. I was really grateful to be able to be in a kind of immersed in a Tibetan society, and I felt like, I was on good terms with everybody, and I kind of got along well, and it seemed like a good place. Then later, when I was already in Saranjay, my monastery that I'm part of now, which is in South India, when there was this young woman who was one of the BA students when I was there that I talked to a lot. And she had become a doctor, and now she was practicing medical doctor, Tibetan medical doctor. And so this was, maybe 6, 7 years after I had last seen her, right? And she says to me, she was like, "Yeah, when you were there, everyone used to always, there's this word in Tibetan, but what just trying to think of the best way to say it. So everyone thought, you had you were always so short tempered, and you always got so irritated at everyone. And now you're so peaceful and calm." And I was like, "Oh, okay." It's like, this is news to me. Like, I didn't realize I was so angry, but I mean, I obviously did, right? I mean, I knew I had anger, that I was getting irritated. I just didn't know it was showing so so so, so much to everybody. But that was, anyway, that was a funny and a good lesson. But it's also, our job to try to become self-aware, right? And yeah, it takes time, right? It takes some time, takes some maybe it's hard, right? Because we don't it's not comfortable to see our own flaws. This is one of the big pushes of the what's called Lojong tradition, the mind training. Right? Of course, all Buddhism is mind training, but there's a specific genre of literature and a specific type of practice is called mind training, Lojong in Tibetan. And so that really has a lot of those texts are these sort of pithy kind of single lines that you can just either memorize or just kind of read quickly, and then gives you a lot to think about with a little reminder, right? And so a lot of those have to do with, seeing your own flaws and recognizing that, yeah, you have afflictions and being honest about it, but then trying to grow. So this is what we're doing here. And I think my understanding of this now, this might be one of those areas where it's not 100% definitive or clear. Again, part of what Tsongkhapa is doing here is just he is, you know, with deference to the tradition, he is taking a Sangha's text and putting it here, right? And then trying to make sense of it. But at the same time, it's difficult to make sense of. I mean, Asanga's writings are very, difficult. They're different than the Tibetan text, right? They're the ancient Indian text. So my point is, I think the idea here is that you can sort of rotate or switch different objects depending on, what's going on for you at a given time, right? Or let's say you start off with anger being the strongest and you meditate on love for a while, a few months, few years even, but then you can switch it to another object, even if you haven't necessarily attained shamatha yet. That's how I look at this. Don't quote me on that. It seems to be at least a reasonable way of, really practicing with this instruction from my perspective. Sure.
Natural reflections like throughout your life, where are you sitting and meditating, like what has happened today, like what are my reflections today? Or are you
Well, this is so let's see what he says, but I mean, I'll read what it said here, but just to answer based on what's coming in the next paragraphs. This is really about kind of your general tendencies, right? Like what do you have a preponderance of in general? But then you're right, when you actually go and sit down to meditate, then you're gonna reflect on, I mean, things are just gonna come up, frankly, right? So you have to apply, this is now what's called applying an antidote. So that's sort of in the heat of the moment when there is an active affliction present, then there are certain reflections you can do, including these when it's a desire, especially, you know, for a person, but even other kinds of desire, meditate on the unattractive aspects or the impermanence of it, right? And then when it's anger, meditate on love, patience. I mean, Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Chapter 6 is all different meditations on patience, right? Dozens of different ways to meditate on patience. So that's yeah, so those you can kind of apply it. Now, this is really when you're sitting down to cultivate shamatha, then it's a little different in the sense that when you cultivate shamatha, you don't want to be switching objects like often, right? Like that's why I'm saying like maybe like you stick with one for several, a long period of time, several months or maybe even years, but then maybe switch if the need changes, right? But at the same time, it's pretty difficult because what Tsongkhapa says later, like let's go through. It kind of later in this very section seems to imply that other objects have value to them as well, so that you can kind of basically more or less choose. I mean, I think that's the gist. The overall gist of this section is that you can choose based on what seems to be most valuable for your situation. And you can always, talk with a lama, right? If you can find a lama to talk with, and then ask for advice and tell them that you'd want to focus more on shamatha. Again, when you're really developing shamatha, right, you need those 6 preconditions as well, right? So that really means that you're in a situation where you have a lot of time and space, you're not working and doing all these other activities, right? You have all the good, the physical environment suitable, and you have good friends, Dharma friends that, are helping you in your practice. And again, you're not thinking about, you have few desires, right? You're not thinking about doing all kinds of activities and work. So, so I guess it's hard to sort of figure out, taking from this text, what do we want to do day to day in our daily life? It's a little hard to figure it out, but I think in general, what you're saying is actually the most valuable, most important thing, right? You see what is present in your mind today, and then learn some antidote, right? Some relevant way of thinking, reflection that's going to counteract whatever's disturbing your mind right now. That's the key. I'm overcomplicating it, but okay. So where did we go? Discursiveness, okay? So, right, ugliness, if hatred dominates his behavior, he meditates on love. If ignorance dominates his behavior, he meditates on the dependent arising of this condition. So I just wanted to mention last week, I made a comment that this is referring to just conditionality in general, that it's a certain phrase. It's actually, I looked at the Tibetan again, it is a different phrase, and it really literally is just saying of this condition itself. It's like the dependent arising of this condition itself. So I think it's maybe referring to, seems to be like whatever condition is sort of currently present in your experience, then you understand how that's connected. You meditate on how that's related to the 12 links of dependent origination, which of the 12 it is, right? Something like that, or at least seeing that it's, a contingent dependent phenomenon. Again, I'm not entirely sure, but there you go. That's why these texts are a little challenging. Okay, if pride dominates his behavior, he focuses the mind on the differentiation of the constituents. And if discursiveness uniquely dominates his behavior, then he focuses his mind on an awareness of the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. Very good. In this way, he focuses his mind on an appropriate object of meditation. So, right, most of us, I mean, let's be real, 21st century, people raised modern education, especially these days, with our devices and being, pinged and notifications and buzzed and everything every, 10 seconds having something thrown at you or having the impulse to grab the phone and right. We probably all would do well to meditate on the breath. Okay. Long story short. Asanga Shravaka levels also states, in this regard, persons whose behavior is dominated by attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, or discursiveness should, for a while at the outset, just purify those behaviors by contemplating objects of meditation for purifying behavior. After this, they will see the stability of their minds, and they will ascertain only their objects of meditation. So they should definitely persevere at using their object of meditation. Thus, you certainly should work with these objects of meditation. Right. So actually that is saying what I was saying, right? In the beginning, right? Work on whatever object is really going to help you with whatever your biggest affliction is. Then your mind gets calmer, right? And you can sort of go to different objects.
Yes, maybe it would help if I read this section, but no, like is he saying that when you sit down to meditate, you should always have that specific object of meditation, or do you incorporate it into like meditation practice? I know 2 weeks ago we talked about like having an object of meditation and how you always have an object of meditation, but is he saying here that like whenever you sit down to meditate, you have that object of meditation?
Right. Well, again, no, because he's talking about actually generating shamatha, right? So we're not like in a position right now to really go and generate shamatha. Yeah. So for us now, I think it's good to have a broad range of objects of meditation so that we get familiar with them and get familiar with different antidotes or different, counteracting ways of thinking, reflections that will help to challenge to overcome different emotions, negative emotions, right? Our afflictive emotions are like the attachment, the anger, the pride, the jealousy, the ignorance. So we need to work with all of them, find ways to keep our mind balanced, healthy, happy. And so when we meditate, then it's more like I would say the best thing to do is meditate on what you're studying, in terms of your Dharma study. So whatever your Dharma study is focused on, like bodhicitta, right? Meditate on that. But then, yeah, if you get some strong affliction arising in your mind, then you have to know how to deal with that, right? So then you need a little bit of familiarity with a bunch of different kinds of meditation or reflections. And again, those would be more analytical meditations when when an affliction kind of arises in that heat of that moment and you want to do something about it, that's more of an analytical meditation. Yeah. When you're really ready to do shamatha, then, I mean, like, it's funny because, of course, we have to incorporate it into our daily practice too, but that's different than being like, okay, I'm ready to actually cultivate shamatha. I'm going into retreat. And I mean, basically, you need to be in retreat, according to these preconditions. I know I don't think you were here when we went through that section yet about the preconditions for shamatha. Well, this was maybe a couple months ago already that we finished it. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's definitely very helpful to just read through the text a couple times and that will clarify things too. But go ahead. Yeah, anything else? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I'll be honest, it's not 100% clear, but it's sort of right. It implies some things here and there that you can, yeah, get a sense of how to practice with them. I think the main thing, like I said, is that we need to learn a spectrum of antidotes to our various afflictions. And as beginners, that comes as we're studying the various Dharma texts and kind of work with what you have available to you. Because you only have so much time and you're not going to go and read every text tomorrow, right? So work with what you're actually studying. Yeah. Because that's what's present in your mind. Okay. If you are a person whose behavior is balanced or one whose afflictions are slight, then it suffices to keep your attention on whichever of the aforementioned objects of meditation you like. It is not necessary to have a particular one. Okay, so that's more clear, right? If you're someone who only has slight afflictions or a balance, equal balance of them, then you just choose which one you like. Okay. Asanga's Sravaka level states, those whose behavior is balanced should work at whichever object they like so as to attain just mental stability. This is not for the purpose of purifying behavior. Understand that the same applies to those with slight afflictions. Okay, so again, the purpose of purifying behavior, like what does that mean really? Well, here it seems to just mean, now I'm not, like, just to be clear, this isn't a term that like comes up in our studies, you know, in the monastery. It's not in other texts that I've seen. It's kind of part of Asanga's text. I don't know where else. Maybe it comes up in some other sutras or something. But it seems to just really be saying that purifying behavior, you have a really strong preponderance of attachment, craving, lust, whatever, a really strong preponderance of anger, frustration, right? You want to kill everyone you see, like, like really strong preponderance of jealousy. Okay, then that, well, of course, it's going to influence your behavior. So you want to, your actual physical and verbal behavior. So you want to change that. How to change that? Well, you meditate on the antidote using shamatha. But also, even just in terms of your mind, then it's like, even if you don't act out and start killing people, right? Then it's still disturbing your mind, that particular affliction. So you have to kind of purify the strength of that affliction before you can move on to work on other practices. Being dominated by desire or another of those 5 afflictions means that, okay, so now he's explaining it, right? Again, Tibetan texts, they give you the sort of kind of difficult, terse, confusing explanation first, then they go on and explain it more and lay it out after. For us, we generally give an introduction that lays things out and makes it clear what we're going to go through first, then goes into the details. So it's just the opposite, right? Being dominated by, maybe a better way to say it is just, right, we go from, the broad overview to the details. Tibetan texts go from the fine details and then zoom out to the broad overview. Being dominated by desire or another of those 5 afflictions means that in a previous life you were fully involved in that affliction, became accustomed to it, and expressed it frequently, so that now, even if there is a minor object of desire or another of the 5, that affliction arises in a strong and long-lasting form. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear, right? You just, see, a wisp of hair of a woman's hair, and then all of a sudden you're fantasizing. Right? It's like, okay, that means you had strong habituation in a past life to desire, right? Or you just hear this, the slightest sound of, you know, whatever, a language, a foreign language that you feel you have a bias against that kind of person, and you feel anger and, no, I hate those people, those whatever, those French, those those Germans, whatever it is, right? And then like just a small little triggered, and all of a sudden you're completely overwhelmed, right? Balanced behavior means that you are not fully involved in desire, and the others in your previous lives, you did not become accustomed to them, and you did not express them frequently. Still, you have not recognized that they are faults, and you have not suppressed them. So while desire and such are not predominant or of a great duration, it is not as though they do not occur. Okay, so this is someone who's balanced, right? They still have all these different afflictions. They weren't, the past life, they didn't really go all out and get super absorbed into one of them, but they still come, just not as strong as for people who had more familiarity, more habituation with them. Because you didn't work to suppress them, right? You didn't really see them as faulty. They just sort of are there. They're just there, part of your life. Having slight afflictions means that you are not fully involved and so on in desire, or another of those five, in your previous lives, and you do see their disadvantages, etc. Therefore, with respect to objects of desire and such that are major, many, or intense, your desire and such arise slowly, while for moderate or minor objects, these afflictions do not arise at all. Also, so this kind of person, they spend time thinking about how destructive their mental afflictions are. They've already worked to reduce them, to suppress them. So now, even a small trigger doesn't set them off at all, and even a big trigger they can manage, right? Also, when desire or another of those five afflictions is predominant, you take a long time to realize stability. With balanced behavior, you do not take an excessively long time. With minor afflictions, you do so very quickly. Okay, again, he's talking about realizing stability means getting to that, right, that ninth stage, right, meditative equipoise, where the ninth stage of placing the mind, which we'll go through, it comes later in the text, where you can put your mind on any object of your choosing and have it stay there as long as you like, while the mind and body are pervaded by the bliss of physical and mental pliancy. Okay, so that's a deep state of concentration, right? So it's kind of saying it kind of depends on your past life in a way, right? But at the same time, it depends a lot on this life too, right? So if you really work hard in this life, and you can balance your afflictions by first, practicing on the objects for purifying, right, with the meditative objects for purifying behavior, then your mind becomes more balanced. You're not set off and triggered by, different objects that you see. Then you can quickly achieve shamatha. Okay, again, the same sutra, being cited by Shravaka levels, an answer to a question of Rivata, as cited in the Shravaka levels, also explains who works on objects of meditation for expertise. Okay, so we're going through the different objects, right? Objects of meditation for purifying behavior, objects of meditation for expertise. Rivata, if a monk yogi, a practitioner of yoga, is confused about the characteristic nature of all composite things, or confused about the thing called person, self, living being, life, that which is reborn, or the nourisher, he should focus his mind on the objects of meditation for expertise in the aggregates. If he is confused about causes, he should focus on the objects of meditation for expertise in the constituents. If he is confused about conditions, he should focus on the objects of meditation for expertise in the sources. If he is confused about impermanence, suffering, and selflessness, he should focus on the objects of meditation for expertise in dependent arising and on what is and is not possible. Okay, so again, to really go through all of these, it just takes a lot of background in these different topics, right? What are the elements? What are the sources? Right? What does it mean? What is possible and not possible? Okay, we went through some of that already. For now, just suffice it to say, this basically means that you have to learn a lot of Buddhist philosophy and meditate on it to reduce confusion. Okay, to reduce your confusion about things, about the nature of the world. Okay, I think that's simple enough to say, to summarize that. As this states, you mainly use these five objects of meditation to stop confusion. Right? Which persons should focus their minds on objects of meditation for dispelling afflictions? Okay, so that's another one of the four categories, is also stated in the same sutra, answering the questions of Rivata. If you wish to be free, oh right, so that is a sutra. Yes, now he's clarifying that is the sutra. If you wish to be free from the attachment of the desire realm, focus your mind on the coarseness of the desire realm and the calmness of the form realm. If you wish to be free from the attachment of the form realm, focus your mind on the coarseness of the form realm and the calmness of the formless realm. If you wish to become disenchanted with all of the perishing aggregates and wish to be free from them, then focus your mind on the truth of suffering, the truth of origins, the truth of cessation, and the truth of path. Okay, again, these are very advanced meditations for people who are very, very familiar with Buddhist philosophy already and are like ready to get some realizations, right? You can use these objects of meditation both for analytical meditation with insight and for stabilizing meditation with serenity. So they are not exclusively objects of meditation for serenity. Very important. That was already covered in the section about universal object of meditation. Anything can become an object of meditation for either serenity or insight. Still, some serve as objects of meditation for newly achieving serenity, and others are used for special purposes after attaining serenity. Okay? Since that, I have explained them here in this section on the objects of meditation of serenity. Okay, does that make sense? Good. He doesn't say which ones are for which, though. Yeah, leaving us to figure it out on our own. Sometimes that's what the best teachers do, right? Give you something to ponder, to figure out on your own. Synonyms of the object of meditation, part 3. Okay, so we're going quickly because this is quite technical. It's good to read through it, but I know it's going to be confusing and can't stop and explain every single word. So, okay. There are synonyms for the images or mental appearances of these objects of meditation explained above. These points upon which the attention is kept. Okay, so she's saying these things are all synonyms, right? Image, mental appearance of object of meditation, points upon which attention is kept, right? We can say focus of attention, something like that. Meditative basis for concentration. These are all synonyms. So again, we're talking about now when you meditate, you're not using your visual consciousness and just looking at the thing out here and just like this is your object of meditation. No, it's something that is a mental image, okay? Mental appearance, something that's, as it says in the Sravaka levels, also that image is called image. It is also called sign of concentration, object in the domain of concentration, technique of concentration, door to concentration, basis of attention, body of internal conceptualization. A nice one. And appearing image. Okay, just to be clear again, the Tibetan of this, I don't know the Sanskrit, the Tibetan that here is, well, image, I think is being used to translate a couple different terms, but one of them also means reflection, just so you know. So the image is like a reflection, okay? So you know, it's something, but anyway, it's conceptualized in the mind. Know these as synonyms of the image, which accords with the object that is known. Okay. Ready to keep going? Any questions? I know we're going fast. B, identifying objects of meditation for this context. Okay. So now he's getting into it, right? Now the question comes. Now, from among the many objects of meditation I have explained, on which object of meditation should you base yourself so as to achieve serenity? Okay, good question. We all have the same question, right? In other words, how do we make sense of everything that just came in the last 5 pages and actually decide what to meditate on? As stated in the sutra passage cited above, there is no single definite object. Oh, good. Okay, there's no answer. There is no single definite object. Individuals require their particular object of meditation. Specifically, if you are determined to achieve serenity at the least, and if your behavior is dominated by attachment or another affliction, then you need to use a certain type of object of meditation. For if you do not, then you may attain a concentration that approximates serenity, but you will not attain actual serenity. It is said that even if you train with an object of meditation for purifying behavior, you will not achieve serenity unless you do so for a very long time. So how could you ever achieve it? By rejecting objects of meditation for purifying behavior. In particular, if you have a predominance of discursiveness, then you definitely have to meditate on the breath. Well, there's some good guiding, right? Guiding comments there. But then it's interesting because then he goes on to say some other things. If you are a person of balanced behavior or a person with slight afflictions, then, as explained before, make your meditative base whichever of the objects of meditation explained above most appeals to you. Alternatively, okay, so he's like, he gives this whole presentation all coming from, so this is the funny thing about these Tibetan texts as well, right? They're so deeply rooted in the Indian treatises, right? In these previous texts that it's like you have to sort of take a whole system of practice or thinking at a time. So Tsongkhapa, he just went through this whole system of identifying objects of meditation that was based on what text? Anyone remember? The one that was quoted again and again and again. Shravaka levels by Asanga, right? Shravaka levels by Asanga. So this is uh in uh in Sanskrit, it's the Shravaka Bhumi, right? Shravaka Bhumi. Okay. So this text is what had all those the four categories, objects of meditation for expert, the universal objects, objects for expertise, objects for purifying behavior, objects for purifying afflictions, right? It had all those different things. So all that comes from that text. Well, now Tsongkhapa is just going like, alternatively, let's just jump to another text now, and there's a whole different way of thinking about it. Okay, so just don't get lost, and it's just different ways of thinking about it based on different masters, how they practiced, and how they learned, and how they achieved serenity. The point is, these are all valid ways of achieving serenity. Alternatively, Kamala Shila's middle and last stages of meditation follow the sutra on the concentration which perceives the Buddha of the present face to face, name of a sutra, and the King of Concentration Sutra, another sutra, in stating that you achieve concentration by focusing on the body of the Tathagata. Right? So it's kind of confusing because he just went through all this and then emphasized that you have to meditate on the objects of purifying behavior if you have a strong affliction. And if you have a lot of discursiveness, you have to meditate on the breath. Alternatively, this sutra and that sutra say meditate on the body of the Buddha. Right? Okay.
Is that still your personal, like afflictions, like your concentration levels, or is that other text stating that like there's no split in between?
Well, that's the point, right? I mean, that's what I'm saying is that this text and Kamala Shila, they don't make that whole distinction and analysis between, who needs to do what object of meditation. It's more generally saying anyone can achieve serenity by meditating on the Buddha's body. Also, the master Bodhibhadra, and this is very interesting too, the master Bodhibhadra explains a multitude of objects. Here, serenity is twofold, that attained by looking inward and that based on an object of meditation viewed outwardly. Of those, looking inward is twofold, focusing on the body and focusing on what is based on the body. Of those, focusing on the body is threefold, focusing on the body itself and the aspect of a deity. Okay, so this is done in what practice? In Tantra, right? This is part of Tantric practice. So Bodhibhadra's advice here, or way of looking at object of shamatha, also includes tantric meditations, whereas the other one from Asanga didn't. Okay. So that also could be part of the reason for this difference, is one's including tantra and the other's not, right? Okay. So focusing on the body itself and the aspect of a deity, focusing on ugliness, such as skeletons. Okay, so ugliness such as skeletons, again, that's a meditation where I have a visitor. Okay. Backing into interesting. Just having fun, I think. Okay, there's a delivery truck there. No problem. So ugliness such as skeletons means, again, this would be counteracting attachment. Now, just so you know, this was taught by the Buddha again and again and again, right? The Buddha himself really emphasized reducing our attachment, right? Especially sexual attachment, because that is the main thing that keeps us in samsara, right? Because it's the strongest kind of attachment, and attachment in general is what keeps us in samsara. So the Buddha taught this meditation. So ugliness means like basically coming to terms with just, I would just call it more like a naturalist perspective, right? I mean, where it really like think of a doctor or a surgeon, right? How a biologist or zoologist looks at the body, right? They just see that, yeah, it's just a bunch of, of course you see the molecular level, the cellular level, but then you just see, yeah, there's a skeleton here, there are organs here, right? There's hair, there's skin, right? Peel it apart and you just look at it, right? Like imagine looking at a cadaver. having an autopsy done, and you just pull all the parts out and you throw them on the table. It's like that's the meditation of ugliness. You just bring that all before your mind, and then that sobers you, right? It gives a sobering effect so that it reduces your desire, your especially desire for sexual desire, desire for bodies, or attraction to bodies. That's right. Yeah, Rinpoche mentioned this, right? He said the body is like a factory of waste. Of- yeah. So that's one way of focusing on the body, and focusing on special insignia such as a katvanga. So this is, I believe, this is the Pali word here would be kasina. If I'm don't quote me on it, but I think that's the same thing. So this means that you would imagine some kind of like disc. So the Pali Sutras also list about, I think there are 40 different objects for developing serenity. And several of them are these kasinas, which are sort of representations of the different elements. So you have like a yellow disc that represents earth element, or a blue disc representing water element, and this kind of thing, and then you can just imagine that in the space in front of you and then develop serenity focused on that. Focusing on what is based on the body is fivefold. Focusing on the breath, focusing on subtle divine insignia, focusing on the drops. So again, the drops would be part of tantric practice, focusing on the aspects of light rays, and focusing on delight and bliss. Serenity based on an object of meditation viewed outwardly is twofold, special and common. Of those, the special is twofold, focusing on a deity's body and focusing on a deity's speech. So a deity's speech would be a mantra. Right? uh, Senma, insignia, it just says Senma. It's a different Tibetan term. And so what does it mean here? I would have to, let me just double check the Tibetan and then try and, it's probably something that I didn't understand though, to be just to, but I'll look again and see if Katamga, yeah, so it says Katamga Sanma Keparchen. Um, it says Sanma Tramo. So yeah, insignia, I don't know. Sanma Tramo. Yeah, I really don't know what it's referring to. I'm sorry. I don't think so. Tramo means subtle. So here it says special, right? Oh, it's a subtle divine insignia. So yeah, subtle is there, but divine divine is not in the text, but where in the Tibetan. But maybe that's what they're, maybe that's because that's maybe what it means, and that's why the translators they knew what it meant, so they added divine. Maybe it means that different things that like are held by the deities, or different syllables that you visualize the different parts of the body doing deity visualizations, could be that. But I honestly don't know. I'm sorry. This would be a place to check with Rinpoche or Geshe-la. Yeah. Okay. Serenity based on an object of meditation viewed outwardly is twofold, special and common. Of those, the special is twofold. Oh, we just went through that. Atisha's commentary. Are we almost? I just want to see if we have time to finish this section here. Oh, there's still a lot. Okay. Well, we'll keep going. It's nice just to read through the text, right? Just, and to be honest, we're all very busy. We have a lot of other responsibilities and just likes, things we enjoy doing other than studying Dharma. So even just being here together in class and just having a chance to read through the text is very, very special, very meaningful. Okay, anyway, I think we have just a couple minutes, so we'll read through this last quote, and then Oh wait, that was the quote. Okay, so we'll read through this last paragraph until the next quote, and then we'll stop for today. Atisha's commentary on his own Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment also cites this passage. In this regard, to keep your attention on the physical form of the Buddha is to recall the Buddha, so it gives rise to limitless merit. When your image of that body is clear and firm, then there is a special intensification of your meditative focus on the field in relation to which you amass merit through prostration, offering, aspirational prayer, etc., as well as on the field in relation to which you purify obscurations through confession, restraint, etc. This kind of meditation serves many purposes. As stated earlier in the extract from the King of Concentration Sutra, if it has advantages such as you're not losing your mindfulness of the Buddha as you die. And when you cultivate the mantra path, it heightens deity yoga, etc. The Sutra on the Concentration, which perceives the Buddha of the present face to face, gives a very clear and detailed treatment of these benefits, as well as the method for directing your mind toward the Buddha. Therefore, you should definitely come to know them from there, as Kamalashila states in his last stages of meditation. Fearing verbosity, I do not write them here. Consequently, it is skill and means when you seek an object of meditation by which you achieve concentration and also fulfill along the way some other special purpose. Right? So he's saying that using the Buddha's body has special purpose. That you develop concentration, but then also it helps you create merit. Also, it helps prepare you for tantric visualization practice, right? Or deity yoga, it's called, right? So that it has these other special benefits to it. But again, earlier he was saying that, but if you have one of these afflictions really strong, then you have to do your shamatha on the specific object of purifying behavior. So to me, it seems like the way I take it all, after going through the whole explanation, it's sort of like, yeah, when you have a really strong affliction, then focus on the antidote to that first. Then if your mind starts to calm down then you get to a place where there's an even balance and you're not that, easily triggered by objects, then you can have a little more freedom in choosing an object. But I would say it's good to consult, yeah, find a teacher you trust and you can consult with them. And there are good teachers around, so why not take the opportunity? Yeah. Okay, any final questions? We have about what is that? I think we're about out of time, but are there any questions? Oh, I think it's just about 7:30. Anything online? Okay, we can do the dedication then. We'll just do the short verse of dedication here, these two short verses. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig, may you stay until samsara ends. Okay, thank you, everybody. So again, this section here on Serenity has a lot in it, and some of it might seem difficult or even irrelevant. So maybe we go through it a little quickly, but it's still good to read through it. And then there will be some more direct, explicit instruction on just how to meditate, right? That will come. Okay, thank you, everybody.